You are now tuned into the Standard Podcast, where leadership meets accountability, and the standard is never lowered. You are now tuned into the Standard Podcast, where leadership meets accountability, and the standard is never lowered.
Hello. Welcome again to another episode of The Standard. And do you know what today is? Today is the day to raise the standard and to continue that. Today, one thing is true that life has weight, responsibility has weight, and leadership has weight, purpose has weight. And if we're honest, many men are carrying more than they tell people. Why do I say that? Well, I say that for the purpose that uh, this month we're coming to the tail end of men because it is something that is undermined to a certain extent. There's not enough emphasis that's put on men's mental health, but it's also the month that we recently celebrated Juneteenth last weekend. Now, also to include that, I returned from traveling to Virginia Beach, Virginia to celebrate my daughter's high school graduation. And at first glance, those seem like completely different conversations, right? Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, Juneteenth, um, my daughter's graduation. But the more I thought about it, I realized they're all connected. Now, they're connected by responsibility, they're connected by sacrifice, and they're connected by legacy. And they're connected by a simple question. A simple question. That question being, what are we doing with the opportunities, freedoms, and responsibilities we've been given? What have we been doing with the opportunities, the freedoms, and responsibilities that we've been given? So let's talk about it, family. Let's talk about it for a moment. Men's mental health. To me, that's a silent weight that we actually see as men. I mean, what's interesting is that men were often raised to be strong. I had a great conversation with a colleague of mine. I was raised to be strong and tough, courageous, and not to cry, not to shoulder those emotions. But nobody really taught us as men how to process pressure. We're taught how to provide, we're taught how to protect, we're even taught how to preserve, but rarely we're taught how to heal. And because of that, many men become experts at carrying pain silently. a silent weight. Now, according to the CDC, Center for Disease and Control, right? Uh, Men account for nearly 80%, hear me now, 80% of suicide deaths in America. Think about that. 80% of suicide deaths in America are by men dealing with pressure. Nearly 80%, not just because men don't hurt, but because men don't struggle, because men suffer in silence. More than 6 million men experience symptoms of depression each year. Yet countless men never seek help, not because they're weak, but because somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that asking for help is a sign for weakness. We've created generations of men who know how to survive, but don't always know how to process. This past Sunday, I had the privilege to be a part of a panel of men, colleagues who are mental health therapists and colleagues who are the founders of, men organizations and fathers, men who have been married for 25 plus years. And the one constant thing that was displayed or that was even talked about on this panel was how men are too quiet when it comes to how they feel. Now, is that true for us as leaders? Are we sometimes too quiet because we're trying to shoulder the responsibility of leading the corporation, leading the household, leading our ministries, yet struggling and we don't ask for help? Something for you to ponder on. See, men, we know how to keep moving, but we don't know how to stop and heal. Men who can solve everybody else's problems, but don't know what to do when it's their season of hurting themselves are detrimental, not to everyone around them, but to themselves. Again, we're talking about Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And the truth is, some men are listening today, and those who will listen after today, the truth is, some men are carrying things nobody knows about. So, what are those things? Financial pressure, relationship pressure, ministry pressure, work pressure, fatherhood pressure, the pressure of trying to keep everything together. And eventually, that statement that pressures bust pipes, well, eventually pressure demands a release. See, you fill that container up enough and put that bottle cap on it and shake it up, eventually something is bound to explode. The strongest men I know aren't men who never struggle. They aren't men who aren't honest. These are men who were honest enough to admit when they were hurting, because strength isn't pretending that you're okay. Not at all. Strength is having the courage to face the truth. That is how we heal and become stronger as men. As I mentioned, we're down to the tail end of this thing, and yet many of us have not gone on a retreat, have not had a single vacation, haven't had a spa day, haven't gone and done your favorite thing, even if that's fishing or read a book or got in a place of just silence. Why? Because you're still trying to shoulder all of the responsibility that you have been given. So there's a freedom that we've inherited. And, I wanted to talk about this freedom because there's a significance when it comes to Juneteenth. Many people celebrate Juneteenth, and fewer people really misunderstand its significance. I mean, they really misunderstand in Juneteenth, if we're being honest. What significance have you found in Juneteenth? It's amazing how, as a culture, we just find anything to celebrate. We want reasons to celebrate. Sporting events, we want to celebrate. Marriages, we want to celebrate. Graduations, we want to celebrate. Festivals, we want to celebrate. But then Juneteenth, many of us really don't understand what is important about Juneteenth, to the extent that I just showed you the actual flag for Juneteenth, but yet, how many of us have been seeing this symbol? Huh? How many of us have seen this symbol? And we have rolled with that symbol as the staple of Juneteenth, and it's not. That's why I asked, do we really understand the significance behind it? Because sometimes we're just finding reasons to celebrate. See, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, what, January 1st? Let's go back to history lesson. January 1st, 1863. But freedom wasn't declared, or shall I say, but freedom declared wasn't the freedom that we've all experienced. Now, many enslaved people in Texas remained in bondage because enforcement had not reached them yet. And It was until June 19th, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, announced that the enslaved people were free. Now, don't want to go into a whole history lesson, but there's some things that are unknown about that. See, it came at a time when black slaves ran to the state of Florida and connected with the black Seminole Indians. And those black Seminole Indians would ask them, "Hey, where did you come from?" And they would respond, "Well, I came from Tulsa. I came from Mississippi, or I came from Georgia." And it was those black Seminole Indians that had formed a militia, would go back to those areas where the slaves came from, and they would go and they would actually murder off or kill those who had them enslaved. Enough said. I don't have to go a little deeper than that. Now, freedom, it had been declared at that point. So that's how we get to Galveston, Texas. Yet many people, they did remain bound for approximately 2.5 years. But that's a lesson beyond history, because even today, many people, we possess freedom legally, but we remain bound mentally. Some have freedom, but not discipline. Freedom, but not vision. Freedom and not purpose. Some have freedom, but not responsibility. And that's why Juneteenth is bigger than a celebration or a festival. It's a reminder of the sacrifice, a reminder of the resilience, a reminder of what generations endured so that future generations could have the opportunities they never experienced. See, the people who carried the weight left us with a great responsibility. So when we talk about freedom, we can't forget the people who carried the burden. People like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Booker T. Washington, Martin Luther King Jr., Ida Wells, uh, Fannie Lou Hamer, and the list goes on. Now, these weren't perfect people, and that's not what I'm saying. These weren't perfect people, but they were courageous people, people who stood when it wasn't popular, and people who sacrificed so that future generations like you and I could advance. And then there's Dr. Opal Lee, who doesn't get enough recognition. Dr. Opal Lee, which she's known as the godmother of Juneteenth. Nearly, I think she just turned 91 or 92 years of age. She's the one who walked to bring the awareness of Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday. Met with the Biden President Biden and his administration and didn't stop, was relentless in her conquest for Juneteenth to be acknowledged and revered as not something significant in American history, but American history. See, most people, they slow down at that age, but she kept moving. That's leadership and that's conviction. That's leading with purpose. That's understanding that legacy isn't just about comfort, but it's about your contribution. Dr. Opal Lee, we can't thank you enough for your contributions towards Juneteenth. That's why we celebrate, because somebody carried the weight for it to be a Juneteenth. So let me ask you, what are we doing with the freedom? What are we doing with it? You know, it's easy to celebrate history, but the harder question is, what are we doing with the opportunities that history provides us? Have we even given that enough thought? Because freedom without responsibility is uh it becomes a waste. Freedom without discipline is chaotic. And freedom without purpose is a distraction. Because then what are we accomplishing? What is the goal? See, previous generations, they fought for access. You know, the access that we have today, they fought for that. That's the thing they fought for. And the question now is whether we're maximizing on the sacrifice of the access that we have. I mean, are we building businesses? Are we developing leaders? And are we strengthening our families? Because many of them did this on the premises of the family. Are we creating opportunities? Are we preparing the next generation? Because every generation is judged by what it builds, not just what it inherits, but what it builds. You know, as I mentioned, the past weekend, um, I had the opportunity to travel to Virginia Beach, Virginia. My daughter's high school graduation. And of course, you know, you just couldn't imagine how proud I am of my daughter's accomplishment because, it is a milestone in a child's life when they can graduate high school and then move on into collegiate aspects or um, the workforce or take on a trade. It's always significant to show up and be present. as a father. See, and this is for some of you, us men who may be, watching and listening to this, right? Um, your presence matters more than what you think. See, we carry the weight and the responsibility, but to our children, us showing up matters more to them than what we think. See, I heard something, it was a story I heard once, and I found this to be true because I had gone through this myself. You know, there's only but so much that children can handle. Sometimes they can be bullied by other adults, teachers, um, and when when others think that you don't have anyone in your corner, they just continue. They continue with the nonsense. But when you show up purposefully to let it be known that, hey, my child has a dad, has a father who is present, it changes the dynamic because now the authority has now entered the room. And I went through it and I experienced that, during my daughter's high school years, is that there was a time that I had to come and enter the room because she was being bullied by a teacher. She was being ridiculed, and it was even her character was being questioned. So I had to have that parent teacher conference, and needless to say, dad entered the room and it changed the dynamic. So I'm very proud of my daughter, Trinasia. Congratulations to you, baby, for uh, graduating high school and now becoming a freshman on the campus of Norfolk State University in Norfolk, Virginia. And of course, we pray all of God's blessings upon you in your college quest. You know, when I watched my daughter graduate high school, I have to tell you, this moment hit a little differently because when you're a parent, you just don't see the graduate, but you see the journey. And you remember the conversations that you had, you remember the lessons, the sacrifices, the prayers, and oh God, the worries, but also the encouragement and the moments when nobody else was watching. See, graduation for our children isn't just a celebration of achievement, but that's the evidence of an investment. And so sitting here today, I realized that what legacy truly is about, legacy is planting seeds that you may never fully enjoy. Legacy is carrying the weight so that someone else can walk just a little bit lighter. Legacy is a part of making sacrifices so that everyone else can have opportunities for tomorrow. And as a father, seeing my daughter graduate reminds me that responsibility has rewards. It's not just pressure and sacrifice and pain, but there's rewarding as well. And that's something our society desperately needs to remember. See, everything valuable requires some sort of investment. This is the mid-year, middle of the year. We're in June. And actually, we're about to leave the middle of the year. And we're halfway through it. And so I want to challenge every person listening. Ask yourself, what weight am I carrying? Is it helping me grow? And I think you really should write this down. Go back, play it again. What weight am I carrying? Is it helping me grow or is it slowly destroying me? The next part is, am I carrying weight with purpose or am I carrying the weight unnecessarily? Am I carrying the weight of others? Next, am I building a legacy or am I simply just surviving? With the pressure and the weight that we do shoulder, am I becoming better or am I becoming bitter? Because, oh, goodness, there's a difference. There's a difference. See, because of the second half of the year matters. Oh, yes, it matters. See, you still have time to make the adjustments. You still have time to heal. You and I, we still have time to grow and time to lead. And you still have time to become who God has created you to be. So as we close on this segment, remember this. Every generation carries something our ancestors carry. It's the burden of freedom. Many men today carry the burden of responsibility. And parents, you carry the burden of preparing the next generation. But one thing I will say is that you can't help the next generation if you don't help you first. Many leaders, we carry the burden of service. And the question isn't whether you will carry the weight. The question is whether the weight you're carrying is producing something worthwhile. Now, if you're going to carry something, let it be with purpose. Let it be with vision. Let it be with responsibility that leads to building a legacy. Because one day, somebody will benefit from the sacrifices you're making right now. My daughter sure is. And I'm benefiting right now from the sacrifices that strong men who I had in my corner and women made. Listen, today is the day to continue raising the standard. I'm Martinus Rolle, and this is the standard. Until next time, keep setting the standard. See you next week. God bless.